Hello, my name is Patrick Ardis, for those that don't know me, and I am with the law firm of Wolff Ardis. I was Mary Lee Wolff's partner. If we couldn't laugh, we would all go insane. Mary Lee Wolff not only loved to hear Jimmy Buffett sing those words, but she lived by them. And on Christmas Eve, 2015, surrounded by her family, that music stopped. Mary died. A lot of you didn't know Mary, so let me share a little bit about her and say I wish you could have known her. She was born in Jacksonville, Florida on January 4, 1950. She never got rid of the sand between her toes, but her family moved to Memphis when Mary was in 8th grade. She attended Germantown High School and she graduated number 1 in her class. She went on to Vanderbilt, and at Vanderbilt, she did very well. She graduated, of course, with honors. Naturally, she was magna cum laude. And she intentionally, by choice, graduated number 2 out of Vandy. As Mary explained it to me, she didn't want to be number 1 because she didn't want to have speeches and presentations. So she thought number 2 was a very good spot because it was like a vice presidency. Not that much to do. She graduated Vandy in 72. And then she applied to law school, much to her father's dismay. Mary had a full boat at Harvard in order to get a degree in business. She decided she didn't want that. She wanted to go to law school, and she chose Boston University, which is even more heart-wrenching for her dad. And off she went, beginning in 72, ending in 75. And that's where I met Mary Lee Wolff. She was an absolute force to be reckoned with, and no one had ever heard an accent like hers in a Boston law school before. She received her Juris Doctorate in 1975, but before that happened, Mary went to Memphis in November of 1974 in order to interview with law firms. Everybody was looking for a job. And she interviewed at one of the largest firms, now non-existent, in Memphis, Tennessee. And being interviewed by one of the senior partners, the partner asked her, "Well, our wives know our secretaries go home at 5 o'clock. What do we tell them about you?" Mary looked at him, and as she explained it to me, she said to him, "You can tell your wives that I would never work for a law firm like this." And she walked out of the interview, her first mark in Memphis, Tennessee, as a almost lawyer. Well, she did receive that law degree in 1975. She did receive awards and accolades, of course. And 10 years after she graduated from Boston University, she was awarded and picked as the Boston University Lawyer of the Decade in 1985. Mary returned to Memphis, and she started to work with a great law firm by the name of Canada, Russell, and Turner. She'd been hired to do bank closings, but it turns out union planners had a little problem, huge fraud. And before you know it, Mary was one of the lead lawyers on the trial team. In 1988, she opened, along with myself, Wolff Ardis PC. Now, there was no question about what the name of the firm was going to be. That was it. And Mary Lee Wolff, I'm delighted to say, was my partner in work and life for 40 years plus. And she worked virtually until the day she died of brain cancer. It's funny now, in retrospect, but Mary became and moved from, "Oh, she's a good woman lawyer," to "she's a great lawyer." In the eyes of the Memphis legal community, she could try a case with anybody. She could write appellate briefs. She can argue motions at the trial level or at the appellate level. She had an intellectual clarity that was stunning and a way with words that was just spot on. And she called the shots straight. She was a great lawyer because she really enjoyed the practice of law and helping people. She wanted to make a difference, and she was willing to put in the time, effort, work, and sacrifice to make a difference. She was not afraid to immerse herself into any kind of factual scenario that a case needed. And one by one, she absolutely earned the respect of every adversary that came against her. One time, in the middle of a security fraud case where we represented the state of West Virginia, Mary was doing the deposition of a big broker, an investment firm in New York City. In the middle of the deposition, which was not friendly, the witness turned in his counsel and said, "Why don't you have fun like Mary does? Why don't you have fun like Mary does?" For Mary, there was no second best. You did your work, you did it right, and no one should be able to do it better. That was her standard. Mary kept her clients' interests at the forefront of our practice. I'll tell you another story. We were trying a case in federal court in Nashville. It was a horrible product liability case involving the death of a man when he hit a telephone pole at something like 50 miles an hour and the airbags did not deploy in the vehicle he was driving, which had 12 miles on it. I was the lead and Mary was assisting me. I made the opening, I made the close. Mary handled a number of witnesses and mostly kept me on track. And then when it came time for the rebuttal close, I stood up, at least almost all the way up. She grabbed my coattail, she pulled me down in the seat, and she looked at me dead in the eye, and she said, "I've got this," and made one of the finest rebuttal closing arguments I've ever heard. Turns out I was assisting Mary Lee Wolff. With Mary, everything was measured. She was a Capricorn. One steady step in front of the other, always forward, no reverse. Make a decision, it's final, unless something really changed. And she didn't look back. She'd make a decision and she'd go. She was very, very comfortable inside of the box and constantly working from the inside to expand it. I can't stand being inside a box. I want to be outside the box. And those two very different minds and very different personalities merged out of trust and respect. And as a consequence, we came to agreements and we worked the case. And if there was a disagreement, whoever felt strongly about it won. So Mary won almost all the disagreements. She was a tremendous partner. One day, the Margolin Hebrew Academy came to see us, me particularly, about a fraud that had gone on at the school. And basically, the school had lost all the money that it needed to operate. I agreed to take the case. By then, I developed a reputation for doing fraud cases and fidelity bond cases. And as a consequence, we signed it up on an hourly rate. 2 weeks into the case, I walked into Mary's office and said, "I figured it out. We can get all the money back." And she said, "Really? Are you sure?" "Yes." "Okay, well, that's great news." And then she looked at me and said, "No, okay, what is it?" So, "Well, Mary, it's going to cost us about 2 times as much as the school lost to get the money back. In other words, the legal fees will be at least $1.3, $1.4 million. And the school didn't lose that much. How are you going to convince them of that?" And I looked at her, didn't say a word. And she said, and I remember it so clearly to this day, "Oh no. Oh no. We're going to do this. You have to do this. Is that it?" Didn't say anything again. She says, "You know, we can lose the law firm. We may not be able to survive." And I looked at her again and I think I nodded. And she said, "But these kids need us. They need our help. So we're going to do it for nothing. We're going to take all the risk. We're going to fund it. And we're going to gamble everything we own because there was 156 kids that needed our help. Mary Wolff made a decision, never looked back, and went straight forward in absolute support of what had to be done because it was right. We recovered 100% on the dollar. And I'm happy to tell you, we had $10,000 left on one credit card, and that was the assets and all that we had when it was over. But we done it, and we done it right. Mary's compassion and her generous heart served a number of Memphis organizations, including the Women's Foundation, the Association of Women Lawyers, the Memphis Development Foundation, the Orpheum, and the American Heart Association Go Red for Women. She served as president of the Memphis Area Legal Services. Mary's love of life was evident every day and was there through the last days of her life. Ironically, Christmas was Mary's favorite time of the year. She loved it, loved everything about it, and spread that joy of the holidays, Hanukkah, Christmas, to everyone and anyone that would let her infect them. And the last Christmas, as we approached, she wasn't going to let it, that is a little cancer, spoil Christmas. 3 days before her death, Mary was the Christmas elf at the Wolff Ardis Christmas party, which involved every member of the law firm and their children. Santa visited, and Mary was the elf that gave out the presents and laughed and played with the children. Mary Lee Wolff was the most intelligent, most well-rounded human being I'd ever met. Analytically brilliant, but mostly her genius was because she listened and truly cared. She looked for solutions that were worthwhile. If a client came into our law firm, allegedly because of me, and if I introduced that client to Mary Lee Wolff, I never saw that client again. They understand and appreciated who Mary was. In my world, who Mary is. This world is a much better place because Mary Lee Wolff lived and shared her intellect, her joy, and her compassion with everyone she met. Mary had no enemies. I wish you all could have known her. I miss her every day. But I know she wants me to tell you, be kind to yourself, be kind to your family, be kind to each other, be kind to strangers. And remember, we have an obligation to take care of those that are not as fortunate as we are. Simply, from Mary Lee Wolff, happy holidays.